Hello everyone, it's so good to be here again. I just came back from the cinema after seeing Civil War, and my god was this a dark watch. This is the latest film from Alex Garland, who's of course very famous for doing films like Ex Machina, Annihilation, and his previous film, Man, which admittedly I've yet to see, but no matter, Civil War is this dystopian future of the United States of America, where we follow the journey of these four journalists that travel from New York City all the way to Washington, D.C. in the hopes of interviewing the President of the United States, who happens to be acted by none other than Nick Offerman. And this president is running for his third term, and he seems to be quite a controversial figure. I'll just leave it at that to avoid as much spoilers as possible, as always. And each of these four journalists have their own specific background. We have Kirsten Dunst, who is this grizzled war veteran photographer who's kind of the perfect professional of that discipline. We have Wagner Moura, who plays Joel, and incidentally, this film honestly made me think so much about The Last of Us. It didn't actually dawn on me that this guy's name is also Joel, and he kind of looks like Pedro Pascal's Joel. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. Anyways, I digress. So his archetype is much more the wild, charismatic, junkie journalist fiending for the action. We also have Stephen McKinley Henderson, who's a veteran journalist who is by far the oldest and less physically able of the group, though he has quite a wealth of wisdom and experience and good camaraderie to share with the team. And of course, finally, we have Kaylee Speeney, who is the wide-eyed newbie who wants to become this professional war photographer, just like Kristen Dunst's character. So there is this kind of pupil mentorship dynamic going on here, which I found to be quite fascinating. As I'm sure you know by now, this is going to be quite a divisive film. It was destined to be so even before it came out in cinemas, so we'll be very curious to see what the kind of debate will be like now that the film is finally out in the wild. But I do find it interesting that the film doesn't actually take a particular political stance in any of America's politics. It has a decisively neutral stance. And to play devil's advocate, I can't see how some people would consider this to be a cop-out because there's very little perspective given into any of the actions or choices or moral standings of any side whatsoever in this conflict. But I do think this neutral perspective lends itself very well, not only to the photojournalistic aspect of our protagonist here, but also in just the absolute absurdity of it all. There's one scene in particular that I'm sure many people will agree kind of echoes this kind of sentiment of this one sniper exchange that's quite tense and dramatic, but there's also this element of gallows humor embedded into that sequence, where journalists are asking like, hey, who are you shooting at? Who are they? Like, which side are they on? Could you potentially be on the same side? And their reaction was quite priceless. There's this total blasé attitude about the way they replied, like, I don't know, man. They're shooting at us. They're a pretty good shot. Trying to kill us. We're trying to kill them. It is what it is. Like, I don't know. I don't care even. And then they just go about their mission as if nothing else existed or mattered. And this is something that is echoed more than one way. Not only in this one specific town that we passed through that seemed to be completely oblivious and carefree for the most part of what is going on, or in some of the family members of our journalists who just live on their farm, blissfully ignorant of all that is happening. But once again, going back to that idea of this neutral aspect of the film, I do think it lends itself very well to this photojournalistic ethos, where they're just there to take footage of what is happening, right or wrong. And I do find it creates a very interesting cinematic quality to it, especially in terms of cinematography, where in the heat of the action, in this gunfire exchange, where we'll literally just pause the action and have this quick snapshot of the photo that was just taken. And as disturbing as it may be sometimes, it still is rather impressive because you have this moment of like, oh wow, that's actually a really incredible moment that was just captured on camera. There's so many moments in this film that leave a lot to think about. So for my part, it's way too fresh in my mind for me to fully understand just what I feel about this film. So I'll be sitting on this one for a minute, but as far as the whole film production aspect of the film goes, it is quite the powerhouse. The dystopian vision of this near future America is supremely well realized. As I'm sure you might have figured out by now, it is quite grim. If you're in any way squeamish, this might not be the movie for you, because we have a close-up and personal look at the violence and carnage and the entire madness of warfare that is depicted throughout Civil War. I won't go into detail to, of course, spoil you the discoveries, but it is not a pretty sight. And it is also deeply disturbing to see, especially for Kristen Dunst's character, who is totally jaded by all her past war experiences that are clearly haunting her soul. But even among this brutality, there is a surprising amount of beauty that is interspersed without this film. Either in these beautiful scenic skylights. There's one scene in particular that really vividly stuck out in my mind with these beautiful pink clouds, and another nighttime sequence that is absolutely unforgettable with this forest fire going on. I won't go into further detail, but I don't think anyone's going to forget that scene. Once you see the film, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And as far as the sound design goes, it was absolutely stunning. Easily one of my favorite aspects of the film. And here we have both extremes. We have these deafening, explosive moments. The first time a gunshot went off in this film, I actually was so startled. I spilled my tea all over myself, and it actually really burned. But then on the other side, there's this deep silence that is so enveloping. And these are moments where all the events that are happening in the film have a moment to just sink in a little deeper. As far as the soundtrack goes and the needle drops, I thought it was absolutely wonderful. Honestly, Civil War on a auditory side, easily one of my favorite experiences this year so far, up there with Dune Part 2. And as far as the action goes, I don't really want to call it action because I wouldn't consider this an action film. Honestly, I almost consider this to be like a horror film. Yeah, super dystopian, but nonetheless, the battle sequences are super well realized and they're very immersive, gritty, and tense as hell. But I think the most interesting aspects of the film was the rock solid pacing and the growth of our characters throughout the story. The performances are great all around. The entire cast is quite lovely. Kirsten Dunst gives a very powerful performance, even if her character is rather deadpan in many ways. Once again, she's just totally jaded by everything she's experienced, but the chemistry she shares with Kaylee Speeney in this film is quite an interesting one, and I do find it fascinating to see how she mentors her and how she grooms this new journalist into becoming not only her protege, but her equal, and how that then in turn affects her throughout the film's experience. Honestly, Kaylee Speeney was such a surprise to me. Not that I thought she was going to give a bad performance, of course. I really enjoyed her in Priscilla last year, but here she's totally unrecognizable, and I do feel that she has so much more substance to bring to the screen, and she just totally knocked it out the park. So it's wonderful to see that she's yet again maximizing on her talent. I also want to give a quick shout out to Stephen McKinley Henderson's performance because I really do love the wisdom and this kind of like Zen-like attitude that he brings to the group. It was much needed and appreciated. And of course, we can't talk about acting in this film without mentioning Jesse Plemons' character, who FYI is Kirsten Dunst's husband. He is simply terrifying in this film. His scene is unforgettable, and I will just leave it at that. So yeah, once again, I'm going to need time to process this film. There is a lot that happens in this relatively short runtime, and I don't want to call this film great because that feels like a bit of a bad omen if I'm being honest, but this is without question a very powerful film, regardless what you may think about it. So in my books, this is easily an 8 out of 10. It's going to be interesting to see in the coming days and weeks how people are going to be reacting to this film. In the positive, the negative, in the in-between, the whole rainbow of it all. And then let's see what happens at the end of this year, because FYI, I am Canadian, so obviously I can't personally relate to anything that's happening down south, though obviously it would affect me in some way, shape, or form. God forbid that anything should happen like in this film. But I know that a lot of people are quite worried about it. Yeah, let's see what happens. Fingers crossed, namaste, and all that. I think I'll just wrap it up now. With all that being said, wishing you and your loved ones nothing but the best. Take care and talk to you soon.